Hello, guys. David Vose here. Boy, it's another beautiful day. We had some rain yesterday, a little bit, and hopefully it'll sprinkle a little bit today too. But it's a beautiful, beautiful day, and the weather is finally kind of moving into the monsoon season, and I love it. The garden is just beginning to just take off. Once it starts raining every day, everything, plants just love actual rain and thunderstorms and things like that. They just take off. And already my sunflowers are about 3 feet tall. As soon as the rains start, they'll go up to like 6, 10 feet. It's going to be awesome. Tomatoes are starting to, you know, put forth their little blooms, and we're going to start having little tomatoes on there. So I think a few of the little tomatoes are already coming on, and it's just glorious. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I'm so happy. But I have to tell you some things. I want to straighten out a couple of things that, I didn't understand my entire life. I used to hear about Reagan and the Iran Contra, and I had no clue what was going on. I just knew that Oliver North was the good guy. Ha! He was a great old guy, and he was defending the honor of the president. How dare you besmirch the honor of this president? We're trying to kill the dead gum communists down there. We got to sell them arms and contraband. What's that? Contra. Is that like a septic? Contraceptic? Uh, you're trying to prevent the pregnancy from the Nicaraguans and the Sandinistas or something. I really don't know what this contraband is, but it's obviously something we need, and we've got to give them arms for the contraband. It's an exchange, and one day somebody will explain it to you after it's all said and done. But don't you dare besmirch the character of our president, Ronald Reagan, and his lieutenant, Oliver North. Upstanding individuals. Now, when Reagan was going through all that, and they had that all over the television, and we were watching it with bated breath, we had no idea what was going on. We didn't know that after that, over the years, Venezuela would crash and Libya would be taken over, and all of this had something to do with the Iran Contra. Drugs for arms, and something about the communists and the Cubans and the CIA, and we had to do it. We had to do it. The result of all of this was we still got all the drugs running in through the country, except for maybe the elite were keeping control of the opioid business in Afghanistan, the opioid fields. But that probably had nothing to do with the war, nor the oil or anything, because that, of course, we wouldn't fight over something like that. We're trying to fight for freedom, and we're trying to stop the drugs coming over the border and the terrorists. And we've been trying this for 50 years. Reagan couldn't do it. Bush Sr. couldn't do it. Bush Jr. couldn't do it. Clinton couldn't do it. Obama couldn't do it. Biden couldn't do it. Oh, Biden actually made it happen even more. Like, we just bring them over. Hey, let's just, oh, there's a cute one. Let me sniff that one. Yeah, it was just crazy. And Pelosi's drunk at the, hey, stop this. We're trying to make money here. Don't you take away our little money-making operation. And Clinton was trying to get in office, and Trump was saying, you'd be fired if I became president. Well, she hasn't been fired. Well, some people are getting fired, I guess. But I don't really see a lot of important people being fired, or we don't hear about how bad Clinton was or Obama anymore. But things are just sort of like, hey, we got to let the bygones be bygones. Now we finally got a real president, and he's going to make everything better. And he's going to bring in this final solution, which is like the one world government AI financial system, where you will not be able to buy or sell if you're a criminal. Of course, we're going to decide who the criminals are. But who's ever in charge of whatever's going on and is involved with XRP, I guarantee it. When this that's why XRP hasn't taken off really yet, because I think it's today they're still debating in Congress whether or not there will be an anti-CBDC bill, which means if we had an anti-CBDC bill, supposedly, the government wouldn't be able to manipulate us and control us. But do you think that's going to pass? Or even if it does, that there wouldn't be some loophole? Because I guarantee that the government's going to control us. I guarantee. And there's no way, if you think that Trump's going to do something that's going to, after all this and the drugs are coming and all of this, it's just a show. Now they're going to say, oh, we're going to fix it. And the fix is what? A one world government with cameras on every corner. And on your phone listening to you while you're talking to your friends. And you're posting pictures and telling the government everywhere you're going with DARPA or Facebook, which is another word for CIA program called DARPA. So they know everything you're doing and monitor you at all times. And this is what's going to replace Ortega in Nicaragua, right? Now we've got 1 million Ortegas. They're in your purse. It's your camera. It's watching you, right? And the communists were always in bed with the capitalists. It's just a ploy. And you might call them ISIS over there or cartel over here or a gang over here. You know, but the CIA created all of them. And it's the CIA that brought down Libya, Nicaragua, Panama, Venezuela, and now Trump wants to own it all. So I'm going to show you some things and straighten out some things that we never could understand, that no one's ever explained to you in just plain English, what's going on with the Iran-Contra and what it has to do with today's vote in Congress about the anti-CBDC bill that Marjorie Taylor Greene is so passionate about. We've got to pass this because she's such a great conservative that she doesn't want the government to have control. She's this amazing, on the outside, she just seems to be this amazing person, right? And then we've got Rand Paul, who's always, on our side too. But why is there only like 2 of them? Well, like 3 people in Congress that care anything about what's right or wrong or whatever. And then the AOC crowd, they're just some foreign element in our government that's trying to twist our minds and take our children. But this is just par for the course. Nobody could do anything about this, but now everything's going to be fine. I'm going to show you, after we've gone through all of this, I'm going to show you the proof that Trump is really just playing a side in this theater. So we're going to explain all of this, and we're going to start from the beginning, from Ronald Reagan and the Iran-Contra. But let's start with here. Let's understand what was going on with Clinton and the Mena Airport, where they were smuggling cocaine drugs into the country. What the fiddly flap was that all about? That we've got a sitting governor who becomes president that is running drugs out of Nicaragua into Arkansas in a little airport with a little white stuff on his nose, and nobody seems to know what that's all about, or whitewater, or why Vince Foster, Bill Clinton's deputy White House counsel during his the first part of his administration, there was going to be some court trial on whitewater or whatever. Well, Vince Foster ends up suiciding himself in a local park. So, and then the Secretary of Commerce, Ron Brown, ends up dying in an airplane crash. Secretary of Commerce, guys. And one by one, everybody that knew anything about this all died. Many people. So what's that all about? Let's start with the Mena Airport. I'm going to read their explanation of what this Mena Airport is. And it's probably more information than you've ever heard in your life. because we just don't hear anything about this. We don't hear the details. We don't know. Our eyes roll back into our head, and we don't understand what's going on. Something about Reagan's a bad guy. Iran Contra, Reagan. What? Reagan's a good guy, right? Well, so let's just ignore it. Okay. Do you like W.H. Bush? Well, he was involved too. Bill Clinton. Oh, we love Bill. He didn't know what is. But yeah, who wouldn't have loved that beautiful blue dress? I mean, look, we can't blame the guy, right? But that's not what we're really worried about, is what they were doing in the Oval Office under the desk, but what were they doing on top of the desk with that pen? And what was going on at the Mena Airport? And how is Clinton connected to Bush and Bush to Reagan? And they're all involved and nobody's getting charged with any crimes. Look at the controversy. Mena International Municipal Airport is known nationally and internationally as the central location in a controversy over illegal drug shipments and weapons transfers during the Iran-Contra affair. In the 1980s, the airport was the alleged base of a massive drug smuggling, money laundering, and arms smuggling ring run by American Adler Berrymen. Barry Seal. I mean, this name doesn't even seem kosher to me, right? I don't know. We might have to look up in Genesis to see if that's even kosher. There are also allegations that the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, oh, they're allegations? Really? The CIA used the airport as a base of operations to help train pilots and troops for the intervention in the Nicaraguan uprising by the Contras during the 1980s. So why were they worried about Nicaragua uprisings? Because the CIA funded the whole Nicaraguan uprising in any way. So they're funding both sides, the uprising, and then they're funding the Americans and the troops to go down there and stop them while they're funding them. This doesn't make any sense, and I don't think it's meant to be understood. I don't think they're going to explain this to you so that you'll understand it. I'm just assuming that's what they're talking about. I really don't know. Ortega, you remember him, right? Well, look at this. In the 1980s, the primary leader of Nicaragua was Daniel Ortega. He served as the coordinator of the government Junta of National Reconstruction from 1979 to 1985, and then as the elected president of Nicaragua from 1985 to 1990. His leadership during this period was marked by the aftermath of the Sandinista revolution, the U.S.-backed Contra War, and the significant social and economic changes. A more detailed look, blah, blah, blah. So, the government, they're admitting that the government propped up Daniel Ortega. The CIA put Daniel Ortega in to oppose the Sandinistas and their revolution, right? Because they don't want these Sandinista people that are probably the people of Nicaragua, maybe connected to communism or Cuba is what they were claiming, but I think they're all in it together. But so they didn't want Russia or Cuba or whatever to have all this drug money. Well, why didn't they just stop the drugs coming in over the border? But no, they wanted that to continue. They just wanted to have control over the drugs. So they prop up Ortega, right, to take over the government, to become the president, so they could pay him a little money, and then the CIA would not only be continuing to bring the drugs over and destroying the minds of all of the children, which is what they wanted to do. This serves their purpose. Put us all in straitjacket and confusion and MK Ultra mind control, which is suffering, pain, no way out, chaos. So this served their purpose. They propped up Ortega, and they got all the money, and they tried to beat down the communist regime or Cuba regime of the Sandinistas. But here's the thing. Who really supported the Sandinistas? Was that also a CIA operation? Were they running both sides? In other words, did the KGB and the CIA work together? Well, let's find out. Now, wait till you get a load of this, as the penguin would say. Is that who we're talking about, or is it the Joker? Yeah, the Joker. I think they might have been played by the same guy. But anyway, the Nicaraguan Sandinistas, also known as the Sandinista National Liberation Front, the FSLN, received funding and support from various sources during the Nicaraguan Revolution and the subsequent Contra War. The key source of financing and support for the Sandinistas included Cuba, maintained a close relationship with the Sandinistas through their rule prior to the revolution. The FSLN was inspired by Cuba Socialist Revolution and received arms, training, and logistical support from Cuba. After the Sandinistas took power, Cuba sent advisors and increased its assistance, especially when the FSLN was pressured by the Contras. Okay, starting to sound like maybe Reagan is the good guy. He had to support Ortega and give them financial aid and arms. You know, they needed arms to fight the Sandinistas, which was communists, right? Okay, let's go on. So then we got the Soviet Union. The Sandinistas also had strong ties with the Soviet Union, signing agreements for military and economic aid. The Soviets provided weapons, including tanks, transport trucks, helicopters, particularly in the early to mid 1980s. We all heard about the Iran-Contra, but I don't think very few of us knew what was really going on down there. Now, you know how recently Venezuela collapsed and, Cuba changed dictatorships. His brother took over. He died, whatever. Then we got the Trudeau thing with, he might be a son of Cuba dictator, Castro. I mean, there's a lot of connections here. And we just can't seem, as the United States government and this Congress that we have, we can't seem to figure out how we could get rid of the communists and we could stop these drugs. We just couldn't do it, right? We just couldn't do it. I mean, hey, it's the communists doing it, man. We tried. We propped up Ortega, man. We gave them financial aid. Well, remember how the Ukraine thing was going? We're giving them billions of dollars of aid to fight a country that they know that they're not going to win. The money's going into some billionaire's pocket. And all the while, the drug traffickers and the terrorists are winning, right? So let's continue. So Venezuela and Panama. Isn't it interesting that Trump was talking about taking the Panama again, taking it back? And just before Trump came into office, we had all this Venezuela. Remember the voting machines came from Venezuela? Huh? And so what happened when Venezuela collapsed? Well, they had these millions of young women they could rape. They had nowhere to go. They were just running all over some of them went to Nicaragua, interestingly enough. They went to Nicaragua, people from Venezuela, and then they went to Bolivia and Chile and all these places, but they're like refugees. Some of them were trying to get into America, and we're like, stop it. There's trains of people coming over. They're all terrorists. Well, yeah, because once you collapse a country, like you did in the Middle East, then the men they're so pissed off, you've killed their children in front of them. They'll join an army to get whitey. Of course, they hate, and of course it's funded by drugs, and so you got ISIS. But, we find out that the CIA was behind ISIS, even though they were the enemy, and Trump, ended their regime and went in there and took them out, right? But yet it was Obama that funded them. We dropped a bunch of weapons over there so they could have it. Al-Qaeda was the same thing, was Russia against the United States fighting in Afghanistan. And then supposedly Afghanistan's the one that were the people that had something to do with 9/11. All this is connected to what? Russia against the United States? Or is it Democrats against Republicans? Or are they all on the same team? To keep confusion and chaos going. And in the end, collapse the countries, which they did in Venezuela and they're about to do they did in Nicaragua back in the 80s. But Venezuela fell, and these are the young men that are now the terrorists. They've turned them into gang members. They're all cartel. What is a cartel? They're all got guns and they're in a military, a cartel, running drugs into our country. So now Trump comes along and stops the drug running into the country. But and stops all the, it looks like he's on our side. He's getting rid of all the terrorists and sending them back home and really trying to stop the people being traded and raped and pedophilia going across the border and the pills. And he's coming against it. He don't like Clinton. He don't like all this stuff. But is he really going to be on our side and stop all of this? Or are they just saying that's the chaos that it took to get us to this point? Now we've got AI and XRP, and we're going to put the final touches on it, and we're going to blame all this stuff because history's going to know that we did all this stuff. So we'll say, oh, somebody else did it, but we're cleaning up. And now there won't be a lot of cartels fighting each other. There'll be one cartel, the United States government or the Israeli government, whichever, however you like to say it. The KGB, CIA, and the Israeli intelligence and the British intelligence all in one big major intelligence called BlackRock. They're running the show. So it goes on to say Venezuela and Panama during the revolution, and they received arms from these countries as well. And in Libya, remember we took out Gaddafi too. So maybe it's because they were profiting from these drug running and financing some of this. So we had to take out Venezuela, we had to take out Libya. But if we were the good guys and we took them out, why then did Libya become a place for ISIS to train? Why did Venezuela become a place where we could buy and sell the little children? And during Biden's presidency, more drugs were coming across. Do you really think Biden is just for the destruction of America, but Trump's against it? Or is it an operation? You bring the world to chaos, and out of the ashes, the phoenix egg is hatched and is born. And this happens every, he has a kingdom for 1,000 years or something. He's born out of the ashes. They recreate and build back better. They destroy the world. They got the good guys, the bad guys. The bad guys are destroying. The good guys are financing all the destruction and trying to stop it, but they can't. And so they've got to be the savior and find out what we can do as a solution. And so, look, they've destroyed Venezuela. They've destroyed Cuba. They've destroyed Libya. They've destroyed Afghanistan. They've destroyed it all. So what are we going to do? We're tired of this. Let's back Trump because he's trying to get rid of all this. And right now, Trump is bringing in the currency, the crypto, the XRP. There's people in Congress that don't want this to lead to a one world government controlling our money, so they want an anti-CBDC bill, which Trump seems to be not really concerned about. He wants you to pass the bill, the Genius Act, without the anti-CBDC bill, and then others say, oh, no, there's an actual provision for that somewhere else. But do you think when they pass this bill that no one's going to have control of all this money and power, and they put all these cameras in all the stores and on the streets and AIs going into place, and all this is for nothing? They're not going to control you. They're not going to watch your every move and forbid you to buy and sell if you don't do what they say. You think that's what's going to happen? So the Sandinistas had connections with Muammar Gaddafi and were reported to have worked with him. It seems like everybody that had any connection to the Sandinistas way back in Reagan's time has been going on, right? They've been trying to get rid of the Sandinistas, which were communists. And so evidently the communists must have been in control of Nicaragua and Venezuela and Libya and Panama and Iraq and Afghanistan and all these other places. And this is why we finally decided to have a war and get rid of them. So now the United States is in charge again, right? Trump's in power. But wasn't it just a ploy to destroy all those countries and then make the Israeli United States one world government in cahoots with Putin? They were all doing it together to destroy and then to rebuild the world in an XRP currency where I guarantee the Russians, the Americans, the Chinese, and all of the world are being run by BlackRock. You think these companies that BlackRock owns, every company in the world, isn't operating in China, Japan, Russia, and every country in the world? If you think that, you have no idea what perestroika means. So, the drug trafficking, according to the BBC News, based on the WikiLeaks, U.S. diplomatic cables, Daniel Ortega and the Sandinistas allegedly received campaign contributions and funding from the international drug traffickers in exchange for freeing jailed traffickers. Now, hold on. What is that saying? WikiLeaks says that Daniel Ortega, propped up by our CIA, and the Sandinistas allegedly revealed campaign contribution and funding from international drug traffickers. So, Ortega was propped up by the CIA and being financed by international drug traffickers. Now, hold on. Venezuela oil money. More recently, after Daniel Ortega's return to power in 2007, his government was accused of using Venezuelan oil revenue. So if we're backing Ortega to get rid of the Sandinistas, but Ortega's taken money from the Venezuelan oil money, which is evidently from the communists. The communists are backing Ortega and the Americans are backing Ortega. But of course, some of it's secret. They're backing both sides. So his government was accused of using Venezuelan oil revenue, communist oil revenue, channeled through a joint venture called Albanesa to fund political campaigns and consolidated power, according to Univision. This included reports of Nicaraguan officials receiving suitcases full of cash from Venezuelan officials. So Venezuela is run by the communists, but given suitcases of cash to Ortega, propped up by the CIA. It's important to note that the extent and nature of some of these connections, particularly regarding drug trafficking and the use of Venezuelan funds, have been subject to debate and controversy. Now, here's the thing. If you say, well, we don't understand what you're talking about, this is all mumbo jumbo, I'm just going to trust Trump. But I have to ask you, if anybody during that time, you remember when you trusted Reagan? If Reagan was the good guy and he was propping up Ortega and selling arms for Contra or whatever's going on there, and somehow he said, well, we got to trust him because he's just trying to get rid of the communists. Right? And now, how many years has it been since Reagan? That's like 50 years. And still we got drugs on the street, people flipping out in Los Angeles, and people just out of their minds dying. The pharmaceutical company is now God to everybody. They have all this power. We're going to an XRP, one world government cryptocurrency, and you're completely confident that it won't be controlled by a one world government. It'll all be free, and we'll all just be wonderfully happy. Well, then you're an idiot. Ain't nothing much I can do to help you. And you know that Obama and Clinton and Reagan and all these guys were just trying to help us. And even if they weren't, certainly Trump is. Somehow or another, he shifted the momentum and he got control of these CIA just because he was so good looking. And all the billionaires now at BlackRock are just all for trying to help the world now. And they didn't orchestrate all this insanity for the last 50 years since Reagan in the scuttlebutt and the 24-hour news about Iran Contra and all this stuff, and we didn't know what was going on. But now you do. It was just to collapse the world to bring in XRP, a one world government, AI. Baba da boom, baba da bing. That's the way the cookie crumbles, says Beretta. But just who funded the Mena Airport with Bill Clinton? The allegations surrounding Mena Airport in Arkansas in the 1980s involve a complex web of alleged drug smuggling, arms trafficking, and money laundering connected to the Iran-Contra affair. That's back with Reagan. While Bill Clinton was the governor of Arkansas during this period, there is no evidence suggesting he funded the airport or directly participated in the alleged illegal activities. Instead, the alleged operations at Mena Airport were primarily linked to individuals like Barry Seal. That's an odd name, Barry Seal, like he's a SEAL for the U.S. government, a Navy SEAL. An American pilot and alleged drug trafficker who later became a Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, informant. What? Yeah, all the bad guys are really the good guys. They're all working for the CIA. The SEALs' activities at Mena, so yes, it was the SEALs' activity at Mena Airport, are a significant part of the controversy. It's important to note that various sources link the airport's controversial activities to the Iran-Contra affair, suggesting that the CIA used Mena as a base for operations supporting the Contras in Nicaragua. However, no direct funding link has been established between Bill Clinton and these alleged illegal operations. Who cares about Bill Clinton? He never would have had enough money to fund it. The point there is they act like, oh, no big deal. We just happened to, mention that it was the CIA, our government, funding this drug trafficking. So why hasn't, okay, we discovered this back in the 80s. Well, actually, we discovered it back with Reagan, and we had this whole thing on the news all day, Iran-Contra. It was at Oliver North. We saw him on television all day long, and the Democrats said he was a criminal and he should be, fired or imprisoned or something. I don't know. But the idea was that he was protecting the president of the United States and that they were doing it for good reason, even if it was illegal. They were doing it to get rid of the communists. So he was a hero. He was defending Reagan, and it was all just like today. We were watching it on television. We didn't have phones, and it was all propaganda, and it was so ridiculous because they were just orchestrating and theatrically making a play for the world to watch, getting us to believe that the bad guys were the good guys and the good guys were the bad guys. But nobody in America ever understood what the fiddly was going on. We heard about whitewater, but we don't know what that means. We know Clinton had white powder on his nose, and so did Bush, but we were never told why. We were told Bush was the oil guy. They were down in Odessa, Texas, which is crazy because there's an Odessa in the Ukraine area. So it's certainly tied together. One of them was named after the other, and it had to do with Bush. And remember, Bush's dad, Prescott Bush, he had a bank, and he funded the NAZIs. So guaranteed it's the NAZIs if you want to go back all the way to the source. When they came over in Project Paperclip, all these little rats that came out of that are all the rats that are running the government and their descendants. And if you think Trump's not part of it, but here's the problem. It seems like Trump is being played as the guy that's going to clean up, get rid of all the corruption and clean it up. But what I fear is that the entire thing was trial runs by the CIA with the bad men in place. Nobody ever got in trouble, but we didn't even know what was going on. But they were running drugs. They were manipulating the whole pharmaceutical companies, all of the bank collapses, 2008 when Bush left office and Obama came into office. They had planned on that crash. And then they brought the communists in to do this communist work with the Acorn and the Black Lives Matter and all the, ridiculous stuff. No, again, nobody knows what's going on. What? A communist is the president now? So it's all been like a fog. We don't know what's going on. But they're orchestrating all of this evil and then doing the Hegelian dialectic, and we don't know what's going on, and the Republicans and Democrats are fighting and arguing over things we don't even know what they're talking about. Meanwhile, they've been pushing XRP to come in and take all the debt away. And right now in Congress, the Genius Act, they're trying to pass it. The Senate passed it, and the Congress has got it, but they won't pass it because there's some Republicans that they're showing, like they're standing up because they're the good guys and they're afraid of the one world government. And this XRP could be used if the Federal Reserve decided to make a digital coin or something, that they could control us and monitor us. So they're holding out. They won't let the XRP pass until they make an anti-CBDC bill, meaning that the government has no ability to go in there and start using this one world currency for their benefit to control and to look into our affairs and to say that some people can't buy or sell unless they get the mark of the beast. So you say, well, this is all great, but it's an act. They have to have opposition, and then they get all the opposition together and they claim they made a deal, and then down the road they go, well, we didn't know, we tried, we did our best. But it's just for posterity. It's going to be written down in the minutes of the meeting for history. We'll go back and read it. Pilate said, I killed Jesus Christ. He was the greatest man. Yeah, we can read that. It's history. So one day we'll go back and we'll read that, oh, there was 11 or 12 congressmen that were trying to save the world, but they did their best, but they couldn't do it, right? Once he crossed the Rubicon, it was over. And Brutus stabbed him in the back. Okay. It's history. The Ides of March will forever be remembered. And this whole thing we're going through right now will forever be remembered. But when we finally do remember it with clarity, we'll go all the way back to Clinton or Reagan with the Iran-Contra, and we'll realize that it's the CIA running the drugs, the terrorists, trying to literally suck out all the money of the world and the tax dollars, government contracts, military things that were just to take away the power from somebody like Saddam Hussein or Gaddafi or some other guy who's just making a little money or thinks they can play the same game. But no, we got a bigger mafia. We have a bigger cartel over here. We'll destroy your cartel. The military was being used by individuals in government that were a gang of billionaires that were manipulating everything. Nobody understood anything. And somehow or another, this whole Iran-Contra was some patriotic thing because, after all, Reagan was involved. He couldn't possibly have had any bad or ill intent. And, yeah, he was a Republican. So Bill Clinton's a Democrat. Bush, again, is a Republican. Yet they all stood up against Trump and didn't want him elected. Well, so they're making it appear that Trump's the good guy coming in to clean up all this. After all this CIA mess, oh, after all, Trump came in and fired all the people in the CIA and the FBI and put in his own guys. Well, he's got somebody in the DOJ. He's trying to get rid of these people. Trump's trying to get the Genius Act through so the XRP can go on, and he's for the crypto and all of this. It could be a good thing if there is a ban on the CBDC. But Trump seems to not really care about that. I mean, somebody else said, "Oh yeah, but there is a bill. That's a separate bill that they can vote on." Well, okay. So I don't know. I don't know whether Trump wants a ban on the CBDC. I think obviously, if you think about it, Trump is with Vance and Vance is with BlackRock, and there's got to be a group of billionaires, the most powerful, Elon Musk, all the rest. They've got to be all in on this, so that when this is over, it will be they control us now. Lock, stop, no way we can get out. We can't wiggle out of it. Worldwide currency, XRP. It will boom, and the world will make all of this money, and we won't have any more debt. It'll look great, but it will be controlled AI. All this other stuff is just preparation, and now they're trying to make it look like Trump's saving the world, but really, he's not going to arrest Bill Clinton or Hillary or anybody in the past or Obama. Nobody's going down for all the crimes. They're just going to say, "Oh, it's terrible, but Trump saved the world." Everybody have their money. That'll appease all the baby boomers. They'll be so happy. They'll have money. They won't care now that they're being controlled. There's cameras everywhere. We're used to it. We get it. We're going to be controlled. Okay, but we're going to have all the porn and the violence and the games and the luxuries, the titillations that we can handle, as long as you stay in your little 6x9 prison with a microwave and a television. Get all your propaganda. Make sure you get one of those rat wheels. You can go round and around, get some exercise. Otherwise, your legs might atrophy. But it's all right because we don't care. We got a bicycle. A little digital thing tells you how many miles you ran that day. Yeah, we put that in the corner. Haven't used it in years. But it's the end thing now. It's cool now. You don't need to have legs. You don't need to be able to walk. You don't need to go anywhere. And yeah, if your face starts sagging, put silicone in your lips, right? And puff up your cheeks. You'll look fine. In fact, that's the preferred look now. A gaunt, weird-looking, gothic, put green tattoos all over. You don't worry about wrinkles now because it's all covered in green tattoos, right? And horns on your head. You don't need hair. You replace that with horns and scales. That's the end thing. It doesn't matter. Be who you want to be, right? You can change yourself into a bird, right? And those little spindly legs you got that you can't even barely walk up a hill, they'll look good. You just paint scales on them and claws for your, let your toenails grow out like claws. You look like a ostrich running around. That'll be the end thing. So it's fine. You don't have to go very far. Anyway, Amazon will bring it to your door, and you can pay with PayPal. Wow. And make sure you get your cannabis in the mail for free, which is great, right? And that's a good thing. That's one of the most important things. I hope that continues to be, widely accepted. But we do need freedom. The problem is they're always talking about putting into place things in the law so that it doesn't get manipulated by the government or some mafia. So that's what holds it up in Congress, is that they're trying to put regulations in place. But what they're really doing is putting regulations in place so that nobody can do anything but them. No one can make any profit off of anything but the government. See, so Trump looks like the good guy because he's going to take all these private individuals and their power and their ability to manipulate and take them out. And give it to the government where it belongs, for the people, by the people, and for the people, or whatever. The problem is the government's not for the people. The government is a privately owned asset of BlackRock. and they will have all the control. And they are owned by several billionaires, Trump included. So Trump's going to take out the people that were working for the CIA to get it started. Clinton, you know, wasn't the mastermind. He was one of their little puppet guys that they put in, Obama, and they were experimenting. The 2008 financial crash was an experiment, and then well, first of all, Whitewater was the experiment in Arkansas. And then it worked. They bankrupted a bunch of people, gave them loans, and then they couldn't pay it back, and they went bankrupt. So it worked, and they then applied it to the whole nation in 2008. It all crashed, and they handed it over to Obama. And then they did the Obamacare, which that means that they can now, the government's in control of your finances, and the pharmaceutical companies could rise up and start making all of these crazy things to control our mind. Biotech, all of this was all planned. Then in the end, they would have Trump come in and act like, oh, all of that was terrible. Yeah, those were all just preliminary CIA, let's blame it on John Wilkes Booth. But it was a plot. It's a plot to use the so-called bad guys to experiment to see how it works and get, some real-time experience as to what would happen if you did this and that and the other thing. Pull this out and yep, the whole thing falls. Good. Now let's put it on a worldwide scale. But when it goes to the worldwide scale, it won't be an Oswald some kid working for the CIA, didn't know what the heck he was doing. Taking some young man, putting him on drugs, MKA, ultra mind control, LSD, or some medical experiment or implant in the brain or whatever caused these people to go crazy, like Jim Jones. And they go out and do these terrible things, and we blame it on them. But of course, the CIA was doing all of it, but we blame it on Oswald, not the CIA. So this is what they've done in the past. It's all been experiments carried out by idiots. But all of this is leading up to the big one, where somebody comes in, not just a newbie like Oswald, but somebody like a Trump. But then the end comes when they're ready to put in place the whole control, the whole thing, where they now have absolute control of everything. Not some Oswald or some John Wilkes Booth, some petty officer working for the man, and Barry Seal, and the Mena Airport, and drug smuggling, and Iran-Contra, and this kind of thing. They built up the Nicaraguan dictator, and then they blame it on him, and then there's fights in Congress, and people are arguing, and we don't know what's going on, but it's all experiments to getting us to this level. Right now in Congress, when they pass the XRP, if they pass the anti-CBDC bill, then there's a possibility that maybe somebody in the world understands what's going on and they're trying to stop the corruption. So my guess is that somebody wants this to pass with the ability for no one to be able to control the money except for the highest billionaires. They've got all the money. They're the ones that can manipulate propaganda. They'll get the bill passed the way they want. They'll buy the senators, the congressmen they need. So whatever happens over the next few days, if they sit and try to pass this anti-CBDC bill, whatever they do, even if it looks like they win and they pass it, I guarantee that somewhere in the fine print, Vance came into Trump's team Maybe even Trump doesn't know, right? That the bill's going to have some loophole. Maybe there's good people and they're manipulating them, and they're, there's fine print, and even the top echelon of the government doesn't know what's going on. Or maybe they all know what's going on. But I guarantee that whether they're paying everybody off in Congress or whether they're sneaking it by them, and even if they pass the anti-CBDC bill, they will have absolute and complete control. No one will buy or sell without the mark of the beast. That's going to happen. But let's take a look at this Mena Airport and who funded it and why it's tied to Nicaragua and what's going on there. So if we look into that, we'll find out, okay, was Reagan in cahoots with Bill Clinton, and he was in cahoots with Bush, and Bush was in cahoots with Obama, and okay, so does that mean that they're all in cahoots with Trump? Well, they don't like Trump. Really? Or is it just a game? Or are they playing? Did Reagan really like the Bill Clinton guy? Were they really in bed together then, and we didn't know about it? Well, maybe Trump is in bed with the Bushes, but it was just a script when they were debating, and Trump looked over at Jeb Bush and he says, nobody likes you. Shut up. Or whatever. Go away. Right? Nobody's here for you. You got 1% of the vote. Nobody wants to hear what you have to say. You're corrupt. Your dad was corrupt. Your brother's corrupt. Hillary's corrupt. And then they had this public, embarrassing argument, and Hillary Clinton standing there and arguing with Trump, and Trump says, yeah, you'd go to jail if I was president. So it's literally orchestrated as if it's Trump against the Clinton cartel, the Obama cartel, remember Trump was against the birth certificate thing and claiming that Obama was born in Kenya or something. So it's always appeared that Trump was on the outside and everybody else was against him. But somehow or another, in a few years, BlackRock, the billionaires who own all the world, and Elon Musk, the most richest individual in the world, are all of a sudden on the side of Trump. Do you think that somehow that just was some providential fate, or do you think that they planned it that way? That it's all shifting over now to put the blame on the past. Nobody will get blamed, of course, really. Biden's not going to prison. He's, 97 years old. He'll be somewhere on an island sniffing girls. But, yeah, and if you think Epstein is dead, you're nuts. He's sipping martinis somewhere, and Ghislaine Maxwell's probably there with him in a bikini on the island. And they're not really in prison or anything, probably. I don't really believe that these very powerful people ever go to prison. What do we somehow monitor this, and we believe that powerful people with billions of dollars that have dirt on all the other senators and congressmen and powerful politicians and bankers, that somehow they could be taken out? This is a concerted effort. Trump was with Epstein. And the Epstein is the CIA Israeli agency that is working through Epstein and Trump. They put Trump into office. They are the billionaires that run BlackRock. And originally they were using Clinton and the Bushes to do little trial runs, but now it's the real deal. So let's hope that they pass this anti-CBDC bill and we get at least a little while where they don't regulate it and we can make a few dollars and then pull it out and buy some land and some tools and resources. And then after that, we don't care, because if that were to happen, then obviously I would say it might just be a gift from the Lord at the very end to give us the resources to get some land and get out of Dodge. But if not, either way, the Lord's going to provide a table for us in the wilderness, and it won't matter. We've talked about before how J.D. Vance, works for BlackRock. That Trump made him the vice president because he's following the billionaires that run the world at BlackRock, which they own every company in the world. There's two companies, BlackRock and some other company, but together they own every country in the world. But BlackRock itself has 90% of all the countries in its portfolio. And so, whatever's going on with Trump, it is sanctioned by BlackRock or the billionaires. Elon Musk is one of the billionaires. He stands to gain from whatever playbook they put into place. You don't hear Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates complaining about Trump or anything because they're all going to gain from this. So if the whole Ortega thing and Nicaragua and all of this, which is, as we've seen, a plot from the days of Reagan to now to bring in drugs, destroy our country, and collapse these countries to bring in a one world government, and to get the children and the women so we could rape and, pillage them. If that's the case, then why is it that BlackRock, in a recent investigation, revealed that harmful mining continues in Nicaragua despite U.S. sanctions imposed in 2022? The investigation identified BlackRock's shares in Grupo Mineros through an index fund as a connection to the Nicaraguan mining industry. So I know a lot of you are saying, okay, so what? So what? They got a mining company over there in Nicaragua. Who cares? All right, well, BlackRock's investment in countries like Russia and Cuba in the past 45 years, along with other major asset managers, BlackRock has invested in Russia state-owned energy, the state-owned energy. So that's the state. They're investing in the Russian state. And banking enterprises. So in Russia, they got banks. They got energy companies owned by the Russian Communist government. And BlackRock is invested in them, particularly through its index funds. These investments contributed to Russia's foreign currency reserves, which some argue supported the government's actions, including the invasion of the Ukraine. So BlackRock was financing the invasion of Russia into Ukraine, all the while telling everybody, stop it, please stop it. Let's back Ukraine with our money. Let's give them arms and military aid and billions of dollars, while we're giving Russia billions of dollars to initially start the war and to continue on the war by giving them oil money and energy investment. Following the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, BlackRock announced the suspension of new purchases of Russian securities and moved to exit its existing holdings. However, the process of liquidating these assets has been complex and prolonged due to market conditions and sanctions, according to iShares. In other words, we tried to make it look good, like we don't really want to do this, but we got to because our hands are tied. We've got to finance Russia, right? It's just complicated. You wouldn't understand. Cuba. It's important to note the significant difference in the relationship between the U.S. and Cuba compared to Russia. The U.S. has maintained a long-standing embargo against Cuba, with strict restrictions on American investment there. There is no information available to indicate that BlackRock has funded the Cuban government or associated entities. The broader context, the question of BlackRock's involvement in nations with questionable human rights records or authoritarian regimes is complex, has drawn criticism. For instance, the Select Committee on the CCP has criticized BlackRock for facilitating investment in certain Chinese companies, blacklisted or red flagged by the U.S. government due to concerns about their ties to the Chinese military or human rights abuses. Critics argue that these investments, while not always illegal under current laws, raise concerns about the ethical implications of funding such entities. BlackRock has stated that it complies with all the applicable U.S. government laws regarding its investments globally. So does BlackRock fund or own Chinese companies? Yes, BlackRock has significant investments, in Chinese companies. These investments are held through various funds and strategies, reflecting a broad exposure to the Chinese economy. A broad exposure. Controversy surrounding the BlackRock's investments in China, BlackRock's investments in certain Chinese companies, particularly those linked to the military or human rights abuses, have faced scrutiny from government bodies and advocacy groups. But it's interesting because they just tell you, yeah, BlackRock is involved with all of that in China. But then they say, oh, but yeah, there's some controversy and it's complicated and, we can't explain it to you. But, if BlackRock was really the good guy and they're so interested in saving the world that they brought in Trump and they're going to use whatever's going on that we're seeing in this country to make the world better, then why are they financing the war with Russia and Ukraine? And how can we believe that it really matters at all whether Russia is communist, Chinese is communist, the United States is... I mean, it doesn't matter. The billionaires own everything, and our president is the puppet for BlackRock. And they own all the companies, every one of them. You think there's some companies over there in China that somehow exist without the billionaires, the Rockefellers, the Rothschild, the billionaires of Europe and the United States, the Bavarian Illuminati? You think they don't control everything? So understand that if you ask AI who runs China or Russia or something, they're probably going to say the government of China or the government of Russia. But it's a lot more complicated than that, and they will kind of admit, but you got to ask it the right way to get to the bottom of this. Who's really controlling China and Russia and the United States? Is it the government of China? Is it the government of Russia? Or is it the government of the United States? Or is it Israel? Well, I'll tell you who. It's whoever it is that owns all the money in the world. And there's only a few people that own all the money. These billionaires. I know there could be 100 of them. There could be 1,000 of them. But they're all related. And I guarantee they own China, Russia, and the United States, and Europe, and Africa, and Brazil, and Argentina, and everything else. And here is how AI explains this. Whether Western companies' ties with Chinese companies and market access lead to direct billionaire control over Western government policies is a complex issue. Well, yes, it is. While it is unlikely that individual billionaires directly dictate policies, not individual, but they have a round table, they regulate the Federal Reserve. That's not a United States thing. That's a foreign entity running our financial services, and now it's going to be given to XRP. And that's great if they pass the anti-CBDC bill. So anyway, it's we're up to an hour now. I'm probably just leave it here, but as you can see, this is fact. It just is. Just from listening to this video, I think you can see that. We can't do thousands of hours of classified information for you because we don't have access to it, but we do have access to reality. And anyone who carefully analyzes this and thinks about these thoughts, because we're trained to think about everything's going on, ignore everything. But once you are faced with it, I think everyone has to understand this. This is just a fact. So it's also interesting, though, that we should have known all of this anyway for years. We should have seen it. But we wouldn't pay any attention to it because we had things to do. And the going nonchalant view of the public, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. Oh, you're stupid. Oh, look, we got all these wonderful pleasures and everything's so happy. And, basically people are just, it's like heroin addicts or some kind of drug addict that they choose to be on the drugs at this point because they're addicted. They have no control of their faculties. They couldn't stop if you paid them. If they wanted to stop, they couldn't stop because they want to not stop more than they want to stop. And so the world is in that situation where it's going to take quite a shake to wake people up. But if you can wake them up and get them to see this, we can start speaking the truth. And if enough of us speak the truth, we wake up, then they can't lie to us anymore. Then what are they going to do? So we should get this to our family members and friends and help them understand. And understand that Jesus is coming soon, and that's why they're doing all of this, right? It's going to be a war in heaven. But yeah, Satan will be thrown out, and he'll have a short time, and then Jesus comes. And during that short time, guys, you've got to understand that if you give one of these little ones a cup of water, you've done it unto me. You've got to understand that you've got to have love and grace. And you've got to do as the Bible warns us to do in the last days. Get out of Babylon, because if we don't, we'll share with her in her sins and partake of her plagues. And I say that every time because it's so important that we start understanding we need to leave now, get out of Babylon, this society and world of confusion, the worldliness and this evil that's in the world, and get some land, go off grid, preferably buy some water or whatever, build you a cabin, take your family there and live in peace. Come on, guys, let's face it. The world we're living in, we're striving for every day, it's just an addiction. We can't be happy this way. We've got to kick it. And it may take a little bit of effort, but you got to get out of the world. You can kick it. And then you can be at peace once you've gotten all the toxins of this world out of your system. You got to do it for yourself. You've got to do it for your children, your family, and all your friends. We need to let everybody know that the Lord loves us. We're not going to start accusing and hating one another and going to war anymore. We're done. Let's let these individuals that think they run the world know that we're done. And let our light shine to the whole world. And let's just love everybody. So go get the word out. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Lord loves you all. His grace will be with you. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one.